So today is March 21st, 2026, and it is 11:11 a.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Ronaldo J. Aguirre Marcano, and this would be demo D129. Actually, I'm going to call it declaration, not a demo, because that has a legal significance. So this will be declaration 129, D129. And again, this is March 21st, 2026. So for this declaration, I have a couple of things. Actually, three things. Um, and there are different levels of altitude in a way. Right? So I'm going to start with the highest altitude, and then I'm going to go down two levels until I. So the last observation, the last series of things I'm going to tell you are more here locally in Cape, right? But the other ones, like I'm going to start by the high level. So so this first thing I want to talk about is something that I realized recently. Um, and when I started thinking about this, it led me uh, to see something that is a bit problematic, right? It's a big problem, really. And when I if you hear, I don't know, right? I don't know if I'm talking to the people listening to this, right? I don't know how many of these declarations you would listen to. I imagine not all of them would be interesting. But regardless, I don't know, if you listen to a few of them, you will probably see that when I find these things, I try to also think about how to disable them, right? Because, uh, like, I don't know, I think I do this naturally because this has been the way in which I have been able to survive this for years, right? Because I have to find the vectors of attack that they use in different areas. Like it could be against my startup companies, or it could be to steal technology, or it could be to uh, harass me, whatever, right? Whatever it is. The only way you can really disable it, uh, because there is no, I guess, right, the challenge in this dynamic that I have with them. For me, the challenge is that there is no if you think about it philosophically, right, the challenge is really that there is no single uh, organization or, I don't know, uh, government body that deals with this problem. I mean, with the problem that they represent as a group, right? Like there is no place where I can go complain, right, or seek protection because they are not an individual, right? So who I'm going to complain against? Like if you think about it, that's a real problem. Who am I going to complain about, right? Am I going to complain about John Miko, right? I mean, that doesn't really solve the problem, right? Because they have 60,000 agents in Katy. So complaining about Miko doesn't really help, right? Am I going to complain about, Suleima Villamizar? I mean, yes, she has a child, but that also doesn't save me, right? Like that doesn't solve the problem. It's not a solution. Really. So if you think about it philosophically, that's why this weapon that they have is so powerful against everybody else because there is no governmental body that you can go and seek protection with, right? Because they are not an individual, or even an organ. I mean, yes, they're an organization, but they're acting as a collective, right? That's the weapon, right? The coordination of the thousands of people, and that is what makes it dangerous. Right? I'm gonna take it here. I'm gonna stop here for a second. One second. Uh, so that's why this criminal enterprise that they have is so dangerous, right? Because there is no place where you can go complain. Uh, but I mean, I'm telling you this not to complain about the situation, but to give you an introduction about why um, when I find these vectors of attacks, and I'm gonna talk you. I want to talk to you about a big vector of attack that I found. When I find them, uh, my natural reaction is to see how I can disable them, right? Because that's the only way I can, um, I can disable the attack, right? Like, because there's no place where I can go complain. And because there is no place where I can go complain, I have to disable it myself, right? So that's why I do this thing. So in this particular, and usually, I mean, pretty much in every single case, I'm successful at that. Like, I can always find a cheap way to disable it, right? Because once you know how what they're doing works, then you can disable it, right? It's not, it usually doesn't cost a lot of money. It's just, knowing what to do, right? By understanding the mechanics, the mechanism of it. But in this case is I don't know. It caught my attention because this is an example of a case in which I don't know how to disable this. Like, even if I had, uh, even if I have the tools or the access or the resources, I don't know how to disable. I mean, this is I think that seems difficult to disarm. So that's what I want to talk to you about, right? But I'm going to start by telling you how I discovered the vector, what I think is the mechanism, uh, and I'm going to also tell you what I think is the parallel with software development, because this is also rooted in software development. It's another map reduce that they have, and also I'm going to tell you why I don't know how to disable this, right? I mean, I cannot come up with an idea on how to disable this. I think this will take a team of experts to come up with a way, right? I don't know. So this is the thing, right? So this all started with the discovery, right? I mean, and I've known this for what, like the Tyler Technologies, this company that manages the electronic record systems of the courts, how they hide the dockets and they hide the documents, right? That they conceal them, basically, from everybody's view, including the target, right? So if I go to the Fort Bend County courts and try to download index number 7, it's not there. It's not there because Tyler Tech makes it so that it's not there, right? So I cannot get a copy of the document, right? And they block documents so I cannot download them. Like, they do all these things, right? And to give an idea, right? If I start counting all the violations of due process that they directly cause, it would be in the dozens at this point, right? I have more than a dozen things that are documented, that I can use to prove in court that they are doing this, right? But that is not that's not the breakthrough. I mean, I've known this for months, right? But I start looking at, I start debugging the situation, right? So I start debugging Tyler Technology. That's what I did. And uh, to debug Tyler Technologies, so I start looking at things like, uh, and by the way, like the connection here is that for example, when demo I think 125, I think it was, or 127, I realized that the thing that enables the corrupt judges, at least in Texas, to enter multiple versions of the same order. So they enter an order, but they create multiple versions. And so they give one order to the target that is not really an order. So the target doesn't, cannot do anything, cannot appeal it because the target doesn't have the real order. They create a second version of the order that they use to harm the target. For example, to kidnap the child or to serve the parental rights, things like that. And they create sometimes another version of the order that they will give to the DOJ if the DOJ comes knocking on the door. Um, so those are the different, but this is illegal, right? Like, an order should be a unique document that is the same for everybody. They cannot have multiple versions of the same document, right? Then show it to different people and switch them depending on what they want to do. But the thing that enables this is Tyler Technologies, because in the case of Fort Bend County courts, for example, at least in my cases, they don't print the document index number. So this makes it so that when you print a document, you don't know what document index that is in the docket, and that makes it so that the judges, the corrupt judges, and the corrupt attorneys can do this switcheroo with the orders. Right? This is what enables that to be. If the documents were properly labeled, this would be impossible, right? What they're doing with the multiple versions of the order. So really, the thing that enables the kidnapping in mass of hundreds of children in Texas is Tyler Technology. And I have to tell you, I would argue that they should be labeled at least as an organization that supports terrorism, because kidnapping 700 children in Texas is an act of massive terror, right, against hundreds of citizens, and they are enabled, right? So I don't know. Like, I have to do research to see if I can lobby for Tyler Technologies, the company, be labeled as a terrorist organization. But if I can't, I will try to lobby for them to be labeled as an organization that supports terrorism, right? Because they are enabling this directly. But anyhow, in the traffic ticket, I also have a traffic situation, right? It's a long story. I'm not going to go over it, but the whole thing is that Trailer Technologies made it so that the entire case is not visible. Like, if you go to the court website and you try to find that case, you won't be able to, because they hid it, right? The reason why they hid it is because I filed in that case a couple of documents that mention Governor Abbott directly, right, and accuse him directly, right, of harassing me with the court. So they can have that, but that's illegal. They cannot be hiding documents because they mention a political person, right? That's illegal. It's obstruction of justice, of public trust. If I start counting the things that act violates, I will be here for 10 minutes talking about that, right? But this is again Tyler Technologies doing this, right? So anyhow, but I'm not telling you this to complain about technology. Like, I'll deal with them in every possible way I can. But that's not my goal here. My goal here is to tell you about what I discovered when I started debugging this. Right? So when I started debugging Planet Technologies, I see that they're in reality a big public company. They are publicly traded in the New York Stock Exchange, and they have a market capitalization of $13 billion, so $13,000 million. Imagine that, right? It's a huge company, and they have contracts with something like 20 different states, meaning they run. Imagine how dangerous this is. They run the court systems, the electronic record systems of more than 12, 20. I don't know how many, right? But multiple states in the U.S. And I don't know if they do this in other countries as well, right? But at least in the US, it's more than a dozen. And when you talk about courts, there's two things, right? So there is the electronics record system, like the dockets themselves, and there's also the electronic filing system, which it could be a separate system. And in some states, they run both. So they control the filing and they control the documents, like what you can see about the cases, right? As a person, as a private citizen, or as an investigator, right, of the DOJ. So in some states like Texas, they control the two things, right? So imagine that, right? So this is what enables all this corruption, judiciary corruption, to happen. But that's not what I want to tell you, right? It's more about the money, right? So I start looking at the market capitalization, right? And it's again $13 billion, right? And this, in this, I have to give you the disclaimer. I think when I think about this problem, I think I don't know when I face these kind of situations, right? I sometimes um, I have awareness when I have a grasp on the problem, right? I mean, mentally, when I can understand what's happening, right? And some cases it happens to me that I understand some of the problem, but I have awareness that I'm not seeing the full picture, right? And this is one of those cases. This is a thing that I'm not able to understand in full. Like, there's something deeper here that I cannot even describe, right? It's an intuition, call it an intuition, right? But I'm going to tell you what I can see. So this is $13,000 million, right, that this company has in market capitalization, that at the end is what allows them to have this dimension, right, that they can operate these systems and get these contracts with 20 different states. I mean, because it takes money and resources to pull this off. I mean, to have this sales operation going that is able to sell this at the highest levels of governments in 20 different states. This is something that costs a lot of money, right? I mean, the operation itself costs money, right? And that's why they need the $13 billion, right? 13 billion with B, right? So the thought that starts forming in my mind is that, well, where is this money coming from, right? Because they cannot, by just billing for this simple software system, because this is a very simplistic system. Like, I think a high school student could build this system, right, better, with better safety protections than what they have in Texas, at least. I mean, security measures, right? Like putting the index on the documents, right? Like a high school student would see this, right? But these multi-billion-dollar companies doesn't see it, supposedly. Right? doesn't see it as a necessary feature. Right? Of course, they say it. This is exactly the mechanism of attack, right? To kidnap the children in mass for the Communist Party of China, on behalf of the Communist Party of China and Diosdado Cabello. That's why I'm saying that they should be labeled a terrorist organization, because Diosdado Cabello and his organization are already labeled as terrorists. And if they're working in this way for the terrorists, I mean, by extension, by pure logic, they must be labeled as terrorists as well, right? But anyhow, I start asking myself, where is this money coming from, right? Because with this simple application they have, they cannot justify having $13 billion in the bank, right? So, of course, it's coming from the stock exchange. So that's why they're a public company, right? But then I start thinking, well, I mean, before all this happened, right? When I was full-time employed by Google or other companies, I had this thing where I would invest in certain stocks, right? To put some money aside to try to make it grow, right? As many Americans do, right? But as a private investor, I have never heard of Tyler Technologies, which is surprising to me, because if they're such a successful company, right, they should be on the radar of many financial journals, and they should be featured prominently in TV shows. But I've never heard of these people, right? But yet they have this huge market capitalization and this dominance on the market of electronic record systems of the courts. So this, to me, was a red flag, right? So I started digging into who invests in Tyler Technologies, right? Surprise, surprise, it's a handful of companies. It's Vanguard, it's BlackRock, it's Two Sigma, Bridgewater Associates, and Goldman Sachs, right? I mean, there are others, right? And the pension funds of the teachers in some states, things like that, right? But they are mostly big investors, like big investment banks or teacher unions, teacher associations, things like that, right? So for example, right, I don't quote me the numbers because I don't have my notes with me here. I might be off, right? But for example, if you look at Vanguard, right? Vanguard, across this set of funds that I looked at, they have investments in something like 3,000 companies. So say that I mean, don't quote me on the numbers, right? They might be off a little bit, but assume, to make it simple, assume that it's 3,000 companies, right? Of those 3,000 companies, Tyler Tech is only one of those companies, right? But if you look at the distribution of the money that all these Vanguard funds have invested, the amount of money that went to Tyler Tech is about 0.02% of the total. And this right there tells you that this is a statistical anomaly, because, I mean, if they have 3,500 investments, you should expect this number to be in the to be on the fourth digit of precision in decimals, right? In terms of percentage, it should be 0.001, right? If all things, but what this tells you is that percentually and in relation to the market capitalization of the company being invested, Tyler Tech is in the highest percentiles of Vanguard funds. So this means that Vanguard has a disproportionate interest in Tyler Technology. This is what it means, right? And if you look at the market capitalization of Tyler Technologies, I'm going to now tell you on the other side of the equation. If you look at Tyler Technologies, their market capitalization is $13 billion, and out of those, $2 billion came from Vanguard. So almost 20%, right? I don't know, 70% of the entire market capitalization is coming from Vanguard directly. I mean, this is another statistical anomaly. If they're such a successful company, why is that not everyday working class Americans are investing in this successful company? Why is this huge chunk of investment coming almost exclusively from Vanguard, right? It's because there is collusion. That's the reason, right? I mean, that would be my contention. But again, I think this is something that requires a team of forensic investigators, forensic accounting investigators to look at, right, to understand the mechanism of this. But I want beyond the attack itself, right? I want to tell you more about the vector that I'm seeing here, right? So the vector is, well, because at the end, right, the most ironic thing of this is that for example, I myself I am a Vanguard customer. I still have an account with Vanguard, right? And I had invested more than $1 million in Vanguard funds at some point, right? So the irony on all this is that I was investing indirectly. I mean, I was investing in Vanguard, and then Vanguard took my money and gave it to Tyler Technologies, who at the end enabled the corrupt judges to kidnap my son. So I'm paying for the kidnapping of my own son. I'm financing it, right? I financed it. So this led me to think. I mean, and I'm giving you my personal story here, not to complain about this, but to tell you what is the vector of attack. The vector of attack is that the Communist Party of China is using our own money to attack us, right? We are financing the attack of the Communist Party of China. This is what's happening, right? They are not even putting money into this. We are financing it through these uh, investment companies that take the money and then funnel it to the companies controlled by the Communist Party of China to perform these attacks. And this is why I don't know how to disable this, because see what's happening. So this is really a financial map reviews. That's what I wanted to tell you. And the way it works is this, right? So you have all the teachers in California, right? So they form this investment fund, right, that they have. But then if the Communist Party of China has a decision maker or multiple decision makers in that fund, they can decide, well, we're going to hire Vanguard, right? And they make that decision. And then, because they control Vanguard, and they control Vanguard because it's heavily marked in the index, and I have all the data points that I'm going to give you later, right? But then from Vanguard, they can say, well, we as Vanguard, we decide to invest in Tyler Technologies, right? And that is a completely, so far nobody has committed a crime. The teachers have a right to choose, I mean, not the teachers, the people managing the pension fund of the teachers in California. They have the right to choose Vanguard. They're not doing it, they're not committing any crime. And the people in Vanguard also have the right to choose where to invest, right? Where to invest that money that they receive from their investors. And they can decide we're going to invest in Italian technologies. They haven't committed any crimes. But so you see, like, this is something that is hard to prosecute because how do you prove? I mean, you can prove it because of the geo index, right? That data that now is public, right? But before that, it was impossible. Like, how could you prove collusion between all these actors, right? But in reality, what's happening is that the Communist Party of China is taking all this money from all these teachers in California, hardworking Americans, and are funneling that money through a two-step process, a two-layer process to Tyler Technologies. And then that company is used to manipulate the docket systems on the courts of all including that same state where those teachers are, right? And if a teacher gets in the way, they will use Tyler Technologies directly, using the judges and the corrupt attorneys to kidnap the child, right, of that teacher that was contributing for years to this fund, right, that invested in Vanguard and then Vanguard, but because there is these layers of indirection in the investment, right? I mean, the teacher personally invests in their fund, the fund then invests in Vanguard, and then Vanguard invests in Teletechnologies, and then Teletechnologies has collusion with the corrupt judges and the corrupt attorneys, and then they kidnap the children. Right? So at the end, it cannot be traced back because there's 3 layers of interaction or 4 layers of interaction, right? But that is the vector of attack. So anyhow, what I found is that the amount of investment of these aggregator companies like Vanguard, BlackRock, KKR is disproportionate, right? And I think that could be a signal for detection, right? And this is something that I don't know. I don't know if the stock issuer has an obligation to disclose, because this could be detectable this way, right? If they have an obligation to disclose the mix of the investments that they receive. I mean, imagine, like Tyler Technologies, are they obligated to disclose to the public what percentage of their investment came from institutional investors versus hedge funds versus investment firms versus retirement plans versus individual investors? If they have that obligation, this would be visible, because if for a firm like Tyler Techs, you will see, chunks of 20% coming from each category except individual investors, and this would be an anomaly. I mean, if there's such a successful company and such dominant, you would expect to see millions of individuals investors investing directly in this company, like with Apple, right? If you look at the mix of Apple, many people, many hardworking Americans go to a retailer institution and buy stock directly, as I did before. I used to have a stock of Apple, right? And I used to have a stock of Google, because those are companies that are visibly successful, right? But this company, Tyler Technologies, that is in the shadows, that you never heard of them, no American invests directly in that company, right? And that makes it so that the mix is abnormal, right? So that could be a way to detect this. But that's the and and this pattern repeats with other things like Akamai, right? Akamai is doing this thing of blocking the reports to the IRS and to the OFAC of American citizens, and Akamai is a public company and it's being financed by Americans, right? So we are paying for Akamai to do this to us, right? It's a crazy proposition if you think about it, right? Now, but as I hate to do this, but I'm coming to you with the problem and not with the solution. I don't know. I don't know how to disable this, right? Or if it would be even possible to disable it, because I don't think there is regulation against this, right? I haven't done deep research on the regulations or laws that could apply, right? I don't know. I find the American legal system to be, I mean, putting aside the violations of due process of these judges here in Texas, right, that they have done to me, but putting that aside, when I look at the code, I think it's highly evolved. It's beautiful, really. It has provisions for anything. Like, I haven't been able to find until now a situation that is not anticipated by these laws in the United States. Like, it's like they thought of everything, right? But I don't know. I don't know if these. I'm not aware. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not aware of any laws that would make this be a crime. Uh, I have to do research, to be honest, right? But uh, for from my knowledge, which is very limited of the law, because I'm not an attorney, from my limited knowledge, I don't see any way this could be a crime, right? Okay, something that these people could be brought to justice, right, by doing, because of the way that it's being done, right? I mean, not Tyler Technologies. What Tyler Technologies is doing is a crime, square, multiple crimes, actually, hundreds of crimes. But I mean about the Communist Party of China funneling the money of the teachers that they invest, they get deducted from their paychecks, and then funneling it to Vanguard, and then Vanguard investing it in Vanguard and Goldman Sachs and BlackRock, right? Investing that money um, in Tyler Technologies, right, which is the company that is used to attack people at the end, right? But I have to tell you, Goldman Sachs is an interesting case because it has a fourth layer of indirection, right? So they invest on the funds, so they invest in Vanguard, for example, right? So they have more than liability, and that, I think, that is very telling, right? Like, they put another layer of indirection on top of Goldman Sachs, in terms of how the money is ultimately funneled uh, to Tyler Technologies, right, and Akamai, and Liana Technologies, and those companies, right. Now, interesting. These three companies I just mentioned, right, Liana Technologies, Akamai Technologies, and Tyler Technologies. If you think about it, the obvious thing they all have in common is that they all have technologies as the second word, right? And there's another company that I've been in contact with before, which is uh, Max Technologies, right? Like the Maxim from Calgary, right? So I don't know. It seems to me, and all these companies are marking the index, of course. So it seems to me like the companies that have as a second word technologies and are marked in the index of Cesaro Cabello and the CCP are companies that are very important, obviously, right? I mean, there cannot be more important companies than Akamai Technologies and Tyler Technologies for the Chinese, because these are the companies that enable all these things, right? And I mean, teletechnology is directly being used to attack citizens, right, and to kidnap the children. And then Akamai Technologies is used to prevent the reports reaching the IRS and the OFAC, right? So imagine that, right? Um, mhm. Let's see, just one second. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just looking at something here on the ground. Um, but yes, so that technologies is an important marker. Another marker that I know that this was picked up by software is solutions. It's the same idea. Companies that have a second word in the name, solutions. Um, they're also and that are marking the index. Right? So it's not only the solutions, the name, but if they have solutions, the word solutions in the name, and are marked in the geo index, those are important. Um, I mean, important because they perform a task that is aggressive, defensive, or important for the network. But yeah, so back to this conversation. This is something that I don't know how to. I don't know how to. I mean, what would be the way to disable this? And it's concerning because at the end, what this really means is that we Americans, right, go to work, earn some money, and then that money is we think we're putting it into investments. But what we're really doing is financing the attacks of adverse countries, right, to undermine democracy, really. Yeah, so it's a it's a disturbing image, I think. Now, uh, this is a good point to transition to my next topic, right? So this is I'm gonna go now down one level in the level of altitude of my topics today, and I want to talk about Emil Michael. So Emil Michael is an interesting character because I mean he's part of the PayPal mafia, right? And he reported directly to Travis Kalanick at Uber. He was an executive at Uber, and he was one of the main people in something they call the Coin team. Coin, as you know, as the money. But COIN stands, they say it stands for competitive intelligence, right? And this was the team that was spying on Lyft and harassing the owners of Lyft. And, like they had their own fight with Lyft that lasted years, right? Until they finally took control of the company, right? But um, uh, Emil Michael is interesting. I mean, what I want to talk to you about is something. I mean, today, I mean, he's a public official today, right? So, I mean, as a citizen, I have a right to talk about these things. Right? I mean, I'm exercising my right to free speech here. And I'm going to lobby for the impeachment of Emil Michael. I mean, I'm going to make that my mission. And let me tell you why, right? It's not a, it's not a, it's not a vendetta or anything, right? I'll tell you why. So, but Emil Michael is interesting because, well, he was with Travis Kalanick, right, at Uber. And then after the debacle of Travis Kalanick at Uber, he was exited, right, from the company. And when I started building key opinion leaders, they did a move, which is that Emil Michael acquired a lot of stock, right, in a company called Workrise, which is a company that is kind of an Uber, but for workers. They send you electricians. I mean, if you're building a data center, Workrise will send your company, if you need it, 1,000 electricians. Like, that's the business model. It's like an Uber, but instead of sending cars, they send electricians, right? Which is dangerous, right, on itself because they inject the box with the electricians. But put that aside for a second. He got a lot of stock in that company, and he became a member of the board. And my former partner, Zuleima Villamizar slash Gloria Espina, was hired by that company. Imagine that. And then they gave her a laptop, and she brought that laptop to my home, right? So what I'm telling you is that Emil Michael set up a situation in which a computer controlled by Emil Michael ended up at my home at the point where the highest contention of competition was with a Travis Kalanick company, right? Talking about Careo and Bob Briscoe's WebMD, right? So at the highest point of competition, Emil Michael pulled this off, right? So Emil Michael was a direct employer of Gloria Spina. Imagine the level. I mean, this is nuclear. The level of liability this is for the Communist Party of China because Emil Michael is a frontman of the Communist Party of China for obvious reasons, right? And I'm telling you this not based on a speculation. I'm telling you this based on hard data that is on this database that was leaked by Diosdado Cabello to me, right, in 2024. In this database, all these companies and Emil Michael and his properties and all these things are marked in this index, right? In this database. So that's why I know that he's a frontman for the Communist Party of China, and he has been a frontman all this time, the same as Travis Kalanick, right? But he employed, I mean, directly, he was sitting on the board of World Price, and he employed Gloria Espina, who really is, Suleima Villamizar, who is, a military officer in Venezuela. Right? And I know that because I have the registration card in the military. I have it with me, right? So, I mean, this is nuclear, right? But don't leave, please, because it gets better. So I sent when I when I created the patents that I described before, I sent to I put in those patent applications a license granting a perpetual license to the U.S. military, right? And I sent I mean, this is just so funny. I cannot stop laughing, right? So I mean, not the patent. The patent application is a serious business. But what I'm describing is funny, right? I mean, what happened? Right? So I put that license grant directly in the patent application, right? So if the patent is granted, then the license is automatic. Like I don't, I don't have to even talk to they have the license, right? I mean, they're talking to the DOD, the Department of Defense, right? So I sent this to the office of the engineering and research of the DOD, of the Department of Defense, to inform them that they have this license, right? And that the Communist Party of China is trying to steal it. Well, I figured out yesterday that recently Emil Michael, the same PayPal mafia man that was employing Gloria directly, or Suleima Villamizar, and inserted his company's control laptop into my home while I was competing with the Travis Kalanick company and Bob Briscoe's company into my home. He was named as the head. He's the Undersecretary of Defense for Engineering. Imagine that. Like, here I have to tell you, I don't know how the Communist Party of China pulled this off. I mean, Emil Michael is a person that was already accused in courts in California of espionage, right? I mean, look at Gonzalez v. Uber. Look at that case from, I don't know, 2014, right? And Emil Michael, if he's not personally mentioned in the lawsuit, he is indirectly mentioned because this lawsuit is about the team coin at Uber, which he controlled, right? So how is that a person that was accused of espionage against an American company of the size of Lyft can end up in less than a decade, end up being the Undersecretary of Defense? I mean, and particularly when the country has this contentious situation with the Communist Party of China. This is incomprehensible to me. How is it the Chinese pull this off? This is something that I hope that somebody one day tells me how is that this is possible. Because honestly, I cannot understand. I cannot understand how this could happen. I mean, is that there are no security clearances, background checks, like nobody in the department, in the State Department, or I don't know who, right? I don't know who conducts these checks, but is that nobody checked and saw that Emil Michael was accused of espionage, right? I mean, how can you put that person and not only, I mean, Emil Michael is very smart. I mean, he didn't pick any department. He picked the Department of Defense. I mean, he probably, I mean, if he has the pool to get nominated or to get, I don't know what's the mechanism to get that job, right? But if he has the pool to get that job, he could have gotten probably any other similar job at the same level, right, in the government. And he chose that, the engineering department of the Department of Defense, right? I mean, it's it's laughable, really, right? I mean, taking into account that this is a person that was accused of espionage, right? So that's why I'm saying that I have to research to see what is that I can do with this, right? But if I have the right as a citizen to ask for impeachment, I don't know if this is an impeachable position, right? But I mean, uh, I have to do everything in my power to get him out of the job, right? So I don't know, right? I don't know what's going to happen. But if I accrue, what I'm trying to say is that if I accrue any resources, any weight, any exposure, anything, right, from this as a result, as an indirect result of this conflict of the patents or whatever, right? I pledge to you that I'm going to use everything I have to get him out of that position, right? You can take that to the bank. Uh, so I don't know. Let's see what happens. But I'm hoping that I get a shot at it, a chance to do something good. Right? So I'm gonna close this segment, and I'm going to create a second part of this demo. Okay, in just a second. So we're back for the second part of demo D129. I think is this one. And yeah, so in the last part, right, I was talking about the Emil Michael career bump, I would say, where he's now in politics, right? And he's now in the Department of Defense, which is, it's hilarious if you think about it, right? I mean, it's like it's like putting. I mean, to give you an analogy, right? This would be like naming the late Jeffrey Epstein, secretary of Child Protective Services, right? Something, something equivalent to that, right? I mean, you are putting Emil Michael, right, who works for the PayPal Mafia, Travis Kalanick, and all these people, to protect the country against the Chinese espionage. Sorry, I'm sorry for laughing. It's a serious matter, but it's really hilarious, right? But anyhow, I was telling you all this because I sent a letter, right, informing the Department of Defense, and specifically this department, of these patent applications and the license grant, right? No license, I mean, license with no fees, perpetual license that the Department of Defense can use. And the person that received that letter probably was Emil Michael, right? And I mean, I don't know, like, I don't know how, because, like they have thousands of targets. I mean, the PayPal Mafia, right? And, these people like Piero Midyar and Travis Kalanick and Bob Briscoe spy on aspiring technologists. They do it at a scale, right? I imagine they have thousands of people that they target like they target me. So I don't know how aware. Uh, I guess what I'm trying to say, right? I don't know. I have no idea really how aware Emil Michael was about me, about my name, right? Specific. I mean, for him, I'm just a line in a database, right? Like maybe he doesn't even know who I am. Right? It's possible because of the scale of the espionage operation, not because he's smart or important or anything, but it's because of the scale of the crimes, right? It's like, I guess, right? If I give you an analogy, right? If you go back in time, right? If you had a time machine and you went back on time and you could talk to a Nazi, right? As they were, fighting the Second World War. If you ask a Nazi officer for the name of a prisoner, they wouldn't know, right? I mean, in fact, they tattooed numbers on the prisoners, right? Because the scale of the crime was so big that they couldn't, possibly uh, know the names, right, of the targets of the crimes. So I think it's the same here, right? Maybe, and this is, I don't know. This is an interesting question. I hope somebody sometime, in the future tells me, you know, what level of knowledge, right, of awareness they had. I mean, they personally had about my case, right? How anonymous I was in this database, right? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, right? But I imagine after things escalated and I got the database, he must have known my name, right? I mean, because I don't know, like as a technologist, right? If I try to be empathetic, right? So if I was them and I built this secret database decades ago and an adversary got the database, I would be probably talking about the adversary that got it, right? So I imagine after I got the database, at least, at that point, he must have known my name, right? Perhaps before that, I was just a number, right, in a spreadsheet or something. But at that point, so I wonder, right, when he opened that letter, and saw the patents, what would have been his face? Like, I mean, uh, I don't know. I don't know if they have cameras in the, at Goldman Sachs. When they employed by Goldman Sachs, I can tell you, they put cameras everywhere. They record the employees, like it's a high surveillance environment. And this is intentional, right? It serves multiple purposes, but because they spy, they employ targets. So because they employ targets and they put all these cameras, they're basically recording the targets all the time, right? And this is important for them, for the psychological operations, for uh, to fabricate evidence for the judges if there's a lawsuit in the future, like things like that. But I wonder if they have cameras at the Department of Defense, because I have to be honest. I'm curious about what could have been his facial expression when he opened that letter. Right? I don't know. It's just funny. It's just funny to think about. But that was the second. Sorry, that was the second level of altitude. The point that I had for this demo, at the second level, right? But now, continuing on this conversation about Emil Michael and his relationship to Gloria Espina slash Suleima Villamizar, I want to tell you a little bit more about something that I got from the informant. Um, uh, by the way, I've been chatting with the informant recently. I mean, yesterday we exchanged some messages. Right? I think it was yesterday or the day before. I can't recall. But it was an interesting conversation, right? So I don't know. Let me tell you what he told me, right, about this situation with Gloria Espina slash Suleima Villamizar, who has a connection directly to Emil Michael, who is this Under Minister of Undersecretary of Defense, right, for Technology and Engineering. So the informant explained to me, like there was a mystery to me, and then he answered the question, right? There was a mystery to me of why they were making the point. Yeah, this is kind of a long story, but I'm gonna just give you a bit of detail because it's important, right? So on the September 8th hearing in the 387th court, where Judge Richard Bell and Oscar Telfair both issued void orders to kidnap the child using Tyler Technologies as an enabling platform. Um, on the hearing of September 8th, when the hearing starts, the first thing that happens is that Morgan Heibner, so the judge asks, what's the situation? And Morgan Heibner makes a statement, and she says, well, they've been visiting with his mother. That's what she said. Right? And it's odd because, I mean, for multiple reasons. My mom doesn't live in this country, right? It sounded like an odd comment to me. Like I didn't understand why she was saying that. But she said that to put it on the record, right? And to imply, to legitimize, in a way, the void order that Judge Bell created. Because if you hear this statement, I mean, if you're the DOJ, right, and you read this transcript and you hear this, what you are thinking is that this is a crazy person, right, that needs to be supervised by his mother, right? So it's to paint me as a man that it's unable to function and needs, I mean, a 40-something years old man that needs his mother to supervise him, right? That's what she's saying, right? But of course, I wasn't aware of the level of criminality of these people, right? When this happened, so I didn't pay much attention at the time. Like I didn't object to it. I didn't even know that I could object to it, right? But anyhow, that was the but what the informant told me is that in one of these multiple orders, which are the same order, but they have different versions of the order, and this is a crime. This is tampering with the record at a nuclear level, right? But in one of these multiple orders, which is the one that is the enforceable version of the order, that is the one that they can use to either kidnap the child or to obstruct justice. In that version of the order, they mention this arrangement of my mother supposedly supervising, right? So the thing is that if the DOJ comes knocking on the door, as they probably did, they probably already gave them that version of the order in which it says that my mother is supervising. And when they look at the transcript, the investigator will read this passage, right? Morgan Heibner saying to the judge that my mother has been, that they, no, the wording she used is that we've been visiting with my mother. That's what she said, implying that my mother was supervising. So the DOJ investigator would read this passage and would think that in reality, I'm crazy, right? And that all this is true, that there was really an order, a temporary restraining order, a real one, signed by Judge Bell with legit reasons, and that my mother, but all this is a lie. My mother doesn't even live in this country. How can she be supervising anything, right? Um, but the informant told me that. That's the reason why Morgan Heibner said that. But this is interesting because this shows collusion between Morgan Heibner and Tyler Technologies, because Tyler Technologies has this order hidden in the docket, right? This is, I mean, the hiding of the order is being done through Tyler Technology, right? So now this proof collusion because of that comment. That comment is intentional to justify these rules, right? To lend legitimacy to all that happened, right? Even before that comment was made, to legitimize things backwards, right? Anyway, but this shows collusion with now. I mean, now the statements of Morgan Heibner on the record are evidence against this multi-billion-dollar company that operates in multiple states. Tyler Technologies. Now, I have to tell you, it's not something that Tyler Technology has already been involved in multiple scandals in multiple states for non-compliance. Like there was a case, I can't recall the state, right? Minnesota, I can't recall. I read it somewhere, but there was a case where they had to roll back the launch. They launched the product. I mean, the integration with Tyler Technologies, and they had to roll it back because there was center complaints about cases disappearing from the docket and documents not showing up, which is exactly what I'm saying, right? I imagine they weren't showing up. It wasn't a technical glitch. It was because they did it on purpose and they got caught. But the person that caught them didn't understand that this was done by design, right? That's probably what the piece that was missing to prosecute them was that, right? They were able to explain it away as a technical glitch, right? But if now this is happening in Texas to kidnap multiple children, this is a pattern of racketeering across multiple states at this point. It's not an isolated crime, right? It's a RICO enterprise. The Tyler Technology is the RICO enterprise, really. But anyhow, but so the informant told me that in that version of the order that they probably gave to the DOJ. By the way, the informant is not aware if they actually gave the order to the DOJ. Ask him, right? But he doesn't know. But if they gave that order to the DOJ, that order says the thing about my mom. But it's the only version of the order that says that. The version they gave me doesn't say that, right? Like the index number 8 that they gave me doesn't say anything about my mother. And in all the reporters that they gave me, the versions of them says anything about my mother. This is only mentioned in that order that they have, like this secret version that they have that they can pull off with Tyler Technologies when they need, only when they need. Right? But they probably gave this to the DOJ already, right? So they're already committed to this losing position, I guess. But yeah, so importantly, um, they already been involved in multiple scandals, right? Investigations, rollbacks, things like that. Because of and the accusation of leaks, like people that say, before I file the document, the adversary party knows what I'm filing, right? Which is exactly what has happened to me all this month, right? Anyhow, I think Tyler Technology is in for a ride in the next few months. But let me tell you something else, right? So this brings me to LetterStream. So LetterStream is the company name. It's a company that I've used to mail things like legal documents, letters, you name it, right? I spent a lot of money on LetterStream mailing things to try to get help, basically. I've mailed letters to the Congress, for example, right? To all the members of the Congress, like this mailing campaign of mailing everybody in the Congress, which I did, I think it was in August last year. Just that mailing cost me like $3,000. Um, but anyhow, the informant told me a few weeks ago that they've been blocking my mailing from LetterStream. Like they do different things, right? And I'm gonna get into the actual TTPs in a second, right? But one of the things that they do is that they, sometimes they like, for example, with the tax return, right? That's probably how they stop it. They deliver it to a wrong address or to a they send it to a wrong place, right? So it didn't get there. It's possible, right? That would be the less explosive way to do it, because it could be explained as a mistake. Right? It's easier to do that, less responsibility than stopping the submission of the tax return at the IRS. Right? That would be more dangerous. So that's what they probably did, right? But here I have to tell you. So the reason why I use here I was a victim of my ignorance a few months ago. So the reason why I use the stream is because I looked in the index of Diosdado Cabello, and it's marked, but with low scores, right? So I thought, well, maybe this is just like they have an agent in here, but they don't control the full company, right? That's what I thought at the moment, right? And so I started using it. And I didn't understand at that point the technique that the Communist Party of China implemented of changing the sign in one of the components of the coordinates, right, to mark important places. But when the informant tells me this, I go and check, right? So I go and check the printing facility of letter stream, right, to understand how they're blocking the things, right? I mean, to understand, to see if I see anything that tells me how controlled this thing is, right? And I check on the places on the Earth that would result by flipping the sign, right? Of the I think this was the longitude. So if you flip the longitude of the printing center of letter stream, which is in Arizona, if you flip the longitude, this point ends up being in a mountain in China. It's the same situation as Lake Pone State. It's the same setup. It's a mountain in China that it's a valley, very well protected with geographical features that make interception impossible, even visual surveillance from the satellite, right? Because of the way this terrain is laid out. It's a natural protection that this place has. And in this area, in this mountain in China, there are a lot of points, and some of those points have as much as 25 million points in the crypto payments database, right? So I understood, right? So they're marking the points for letter stream in China, right? So this is how controlled this company is, the letter stream, right? So this is a company that allows you to mail things from your home. You can upload a PDF document and they mail it for you, certified mail, FedEx, however you need it. But this is really a Chinese company, right? So if they need to stop the mail, they do it. If they need to tamper with it, they do it that way. You see, it's the easier ways to obstruct justice, right? Or obstruct you reaching out to authorities, to journalists, to whoever, right? But here I discover some of the TTPs, right? Because now that I'm aware, I'm watching, right? So I started when this thing escalated recently, in the last few days. I mean, this new escalation, right? I started mailing letters to different people, right? Like, for example, I reported Tyler Technologies to the OFAC, and then I took that and sent it to three different bar associations of three different states. I think it was Washington, uh, Washington. I can't recall the other two. Minnesota, I think is the other one, and there was another state, Maryland, I think is the other one. So I sent it to those three states, and so this is what happened, right? After I sent that, I realized that letter stream somehow changed the state of destination of the letter that was going to the Bar Association of Washington. They replaced Washington by Wisconsin. So the initials of the two-letter code for Washington is WA. They changed it for WI. So this would make, because I'm sending this through registered mail, right? So these people at the Bar Associations cannot say that they didn't know, right? And this is important because Tyler Technologies have contracts with the courts of those states, right? That's why I'm accusing them with the states where they have business, right? So they get investigated by multiple states. That's what I want to do. Because they cannot escape investigations from 24 states. I mean, their own size and dominance of the market is going to be the downfall because they will not be able to cover all the crimes at the same time. You see, they can cover up one crime, right? They can hide things, and in my case, for example, but they have committed hundreds of these instances, right? They have done this hundreds of times in 24 states or something like that. So they can at the same time hide them in all the states. They don't. They just don't have that manpower, right? So they're gonna get caught in one of these states, and that's what I'm aiming for. Right? But when I do this, immediately they change the letter stream. They changed the state of the one that was going to the Washington State Bar Association. And Washington is interesting because that's where the headquarters of Amazon and Microsoft are, right? Which are two important pieces of this network. So it's obvious to me, right? That I mean, they could have changed any of the three, but they changed that one, right? The same thing happened when I started mailing notices for about the patent applications and how they could disrupt their investments to the banks. So I sent it to multiple banks: Goldman Sachs, Vanguard, Fidelity, Bank of America, Citigroup, etc. Right? And LetterStream did something similar. What they did is that they removed the company name from the recipient. So, for example, I sent it to Jan Hatzius, is his name, the head of GIR at Goldman Sachs, but LetterStream removed the word Goldman Sachs from the label. It only said Jan Hatzius, right? So this makes the legal service invalid, right? Because they could say, well, first of all, they can reject it by saying, well, this is not addressed to the company. This is addressed to a person, and we don't know who this person is. I mean, the person in the mailing room can say that, right? And return the mail. Also, uh, even if if I print this receipt or this the service, legally speaking, in court will be invalid against Goldman Sachs because Goldman Sachs as a company is not listed in that label. Yeah. So it's a way to protect Goldman Sachs, the entity, from legal liability. So they did this with Goldman Sachs, and they also did it with let me stop here for a second. They also did it with Vanguard. With Vanguard, they did the same thing. They remove, I mean, letter stream, remove intention. And I'm telling you, this is intentional because I'm very careful because of obvious reasons. Right? Like for me, this is a life or death situation. I'm not going to make a mistake in this mail. Right? I triple check them 5 times if I need to. Right? I am sure that when I submit the thing, it's perfect. And it happened in this instance. But what's interesting is in which instances they choose to tamper with the mail, right? It was in the instances of Goldman Sachs, Vanguard, and Goldman Sachs, Vanguard, what's the other one? And the State Bar Association in Washington, right? They could have tampered with any other thing, but those are the ones that they pick. So of course, when this happens, I have to go and destroy the mailing and recreate it, right? And then immediately print the label so they see that I have a copy already. If they change it, I mean, that's on them, right? But I already have the proof that I sent it correctly, which is what I need for court, right? Whether they say they received it or not, I mean, that's on them. I cannot, do anything about that, and I should not have to do anything about that. As long as I have proof that I mailed it correctly, that's enough, right? Legally speaking. Right? So that's why the stream tampers with the. But the important thing is that they're trying to protect is Goldman Sachs, Vanguard, and the Washington, which is where Bill Gates, the Washington State Bar personnel, which is where the interests of Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos are. So that I think that is on itself very telling. Um, right, one second. Yes. So one second. Yes. So that's where they choose to pull that off, to pull that TTP off of changing the. But then, this is kind of stream, and again, it's marked on the index, but in this bizarre location in China, right? Which is interesting, right? So in the encryption keys, they put them in China, so to make it harder for the FBI to see, and then therefore decrypt the secret communications in which that they use to coordinate all this tampering, right? Because that's a crime. And tampering with mail is a crime, and especially if you're doing it to protect legally a RICO enterprise. So anyhow, I of course reported letter string to the OFAC, put a little bit of heat on them, right? Hopefully they will still keep tampering or destroying the mailings or interfering with them in some way, and they will get caught, right? And if they don't do it, then I succeed because then the mailings will get where I need them to get. Right? So either way, it's a win. Right? It's an unescapable situation, I think, that sense. Um, but anyhow, I sent these letters correctly, and I have the proof that I sent them correctly to these three different state bar associations, to the people that basically would regulate the contract with the contracts that they have for the courts with Tyler Technologies. And I attached there the motion to recuse Judge Kelly Crow of the JP11 in Fort Bend County. This traffic citation that they have, and the citation is on Monday, the 23rd. And the reason why I'm asking just to recuse the court is because, well, first of all, I'm suing Greg Abbott in federal court. I cannot have a fair trial in Fort Bend County. That's obvious, right? You cannot be. I mean, this court is all the personnel of the court is controlled by Greg Abbott, who I am suing in federal court. Secondly, on February 2nd, the bailiff, he prevented me from accessing the court physically. He stopped me from entering the courtroom. Right? And the clerk on that same day refused to file documents on my own case. I gave her the correct documents to file, and she said, "No, I'm not going to file them." So, I mean, these are already two serious violations of due process. So how can I have a fair trial in this court if they don't let me file documents and they don't let me enter the courtroom? Right? And third, I published a book in which I put Judge K.P. George in the cover. And this book talks about judiciary corruption in Fort Bend County and in Texas. And this Judge K.P. George is the highest executive authority in Fort Bend County where this court is. And he's in trial for money laundering. So if I publish a book about this, this corruption and these financial crimes of the highest executive authority, how can I expect to have a fair trial in this court? And also, I had already filed two motions for discovery, and the court has not addressed any of them. Right? Like they haven't given me the discovery that I requested, the footage of the traffic stop, all those things, right? The footage of the lobby of the court from February 2nd, where the bailiff stopped me from entering the courtroom, and where the clerk did not want to say that she wouldn't file the documents, right? So I'm asking for all this footage, and they're not giving it to me. How can we even start a pre-trial if they're not fulfilling their obligation in terms of discovery? So you see, it's but anyhow, so I asked the clerk. So I went there on Friday, and I asked the clerk for the discovery, and she said we don't have it. She confirmed that there is no answer to the discovery, and the pre-trial supposedly is on Monday. Right? So anyhow, I filed the motion to recuse on Friday because of all these reasons, including the lack of the answer to the discovery, which is an obligation. That's not discretionary. It's a mandatory action they have to take, right? They have to respond to it. They can say no, but they have to say it, right? They cannot just ignore the request as they're doing. If they're going to say no, they have to say why. So anyhow, that's what happened. So, and the other reason why I'm asking for recusal is because this court is obviously colliding or is in collusion with Tyler Technologies to hide the docket, as I explained before. Like the entire case, if you go to the Fort Bend County website and you search for this case, you will not be able to find it because Tyler Technology has it hidden to protect Judge Crow and Greg Abbott, right? And KP George, he is in this moment on trial for facing two charges, not one, but two charges of money laundering. So in that motion to recuse, I also take the opportunity to ask the judge to compel Tyler Technologies to make the docket publicly visible, as it should, because every single traffic case in this court is visible, except mine. Mine is the only case I could find that is not visible. Right? I mean, there may be others, right? Because I don't have all the list of all the cases. But there's similar cases in this court that are visible. Like there's the only thing that is different about this case is that it mentions Greg Abbott and that it mentions, the documents that I filed. on February 2nd. They mentioned Greg Abbott and they mentioned KP George. Um, and they mentioned Talent Technologies, right? So that's the only thing that's different. And now the docket is hidden. It cannot be seen by anybody, not me, not anybody. It's hidden from all the public, from journalists, from investigators, from everybody, right? It's a secret docket that they have. And this thing about having secret dockets is not new. This also happened in Florida years ago. A group of judges had like two different court records, one that was public and one that was private, that only them could see, and they got caught, of course. But I don't know which was the electronic record system that they were using. Florida, right? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but it would be interesting to see who was the company, right? Yes. One second. Yes. So, yeah, so that's the saga with the traffic citation, right? And this is just remember, like this is not that I was speeding. This was a police officer that stopped me when I was on my way to the federal court to file an important document against Greg Abbott, naming Greg Abbott, right? The police officer stopped me and gave me a citation because he said that I had lights on my vehicle that were blue, and that's not true. The lights are white. That's why they don't want to show me the recordings, right? Because they show that the police officer was lying and that he was doing that to prevent me from filing that document in federal court against Greg Abbott, right? That's the entire thing. That's why they cannot give me the discovery because it would be giving me evidence against Greg Abbott, right? They can't do that. Uh, so that's basically the reason, right? Um, one second. So yeah. But anyhow, I what I did, I took this motion to recuse, which is now the judge cannot do anything. Like she is supposedly stripped from all authority until she either recuse herself or forwards it to somebody else to decide, right? So on Monday she cannot really do anything, right? That's what the law says. But these people, they're honey badgers, as I said, they do anything, right? Uh, but let's see, because now I also sent this to the OFAC, right? So if she does something on Monday to put me in prison with any excuse, I'm hoping that the OFAC is watching. Um, but I took this motion to recuse in which I'm asking the judge to compel Tyler Technologies. Imagine this. Like, I have to ask the judge to compel the company that runs the electronic systems of the court to not hide my case. Think about what this means, really, the implications of this thing that I'm telling you, right? This is the level of control that the Chinese have over everybody in America. I mean, it shows you the level of control that they have. With these, right, with the technology companies and the microprocessors and stuff. Um, so, uh, so I took that motion to recuse that mentions Tyler Technologies, and I sent it to Tyler Technologies as a legal notice, asking them to preserve evidence because I'm going to pursue this civil, right? And of course, Letter Stream also modified the label, right? They also changed, they removed the Tyler Technologies wording from the label. And to protect the company. It's the same thing, right? So this tells you that for the Chinese, Tyler Technologies is, in the level of how much we need to protect this, right? It's at the same level of Akamai uh, and Vanguard, right? And the State Bar in Washington, where Bill Gates and Bezos are. So I mean, I mean, with those little actions in letter stream, they gave me a lot of intelligence. I mean, they let me understand a lot of. I mean, they let me basically understand their value, their scale of value, right? What is that they value the most, and that's important for me to understand because that's where I have to hit them, right? That's why I immediately shift focus to Tyler Technologies. That's where I have to hit them because that's where they have the most criminal liability. Because we're talking about, I don't know, I can only imagine the amount of docket tampering they could have done in 24 states, right? I mean, this is going to be nuclear. So let's see. Let's see what happens. So I don't know. I sent this to everybody. I sent this to the DOJ. I'm talking about the notice that I sent to Tyler Technologies that in turn has attached the motion to recuse, and in turn it has attached the evidence of obstruction and the book. Right, the book is referenced in this motion to recuse. Uh, so I sent all these to the DOJ. I sent these to the OFAC. So, it's a circle of transparency, like this technique that I described before. Like now, everybody knows that this notice and this motion to recuse and Greg Abbott and all this is out there, right? And so they have a choice to make. I mean, collective, right? One option is, everybody decides to have collusion with everybody, right? I mean, that's one solution, right? That they have agents in all these places, and all of them say, well, we're going to collectively ignore this, right? But if they, I mean, that would be like creating. I mean, I don't mean to turn this into a joke. Like, I think that you have to try to see the funny things on all this, because otherwise you would turn yourself crazy. Right? But it would be, I mean, I'm trying to think, right? If all these people, right, that I sent this letter to decide to collectively come together and form a pact to ignore everything, right, to ignore all this together as a team, right, they would have to name this something like the Board of Peace, right? Because like they like to do this a lot. Like when they when they want to do something that is really criminal, they name it peace. Like for example, when Morgan Heimler put that clause in the order, right? I described this in one of the demos where she said, any officer of peace can do anything to enforce these orders and without any liability, criminal or civil, like something like that. I mean, please. Or when Diosdado Cabello named himself Minister of Peace in Venezuela, right? I mean, I mean, they're ironic like that, right? They seem to have a sense of humor about these things. Right? But so what I'm trying to say is that if all these people decide to come together as a team and make a pact to ignore the notice and what Tyler Technologies is doing in 24 states, they would have to give a name to this effort, right, to this project, and they will have to name it something like the Board of Peace or something like that, right? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. But that's the situation with Tyler Tech. So this thing is escalating really, really quickly. Now let me tell you why this escalation started in the first place. Right? This started with a very mundane thing, and then here I'm going to go to the lowest, to the hyper local level. Um, So this started with a very mundane thing. It started with an incident of harassment that they did last week, right? I mean, this is what prompted me to escalate in this way, right? Uh, because it's this dynamic with them in a way. It's kind of a dance, right? Like you cannot go and do everything you could do, right? You have to like dance with them and to understand, right? What is that it hurts, right? Like for example, with the letter stream, right? Now letter stream basically gave me intelligence of where is that it hurts, and of course that's where I'm gonna hit them, right? As hard as I can. But this started last week, right? Because I've noticed that they had all my keyboards bought, like all my keyboards in my home, the computer keyboards. Like I have to tell you, like I've tried buying keyboards in the stores. I bought some at Office Max, some at Office Depot, some at Micro Center. I bought some at Walmart, and all of them are bought. Like it's impressive. Like I imagine they do it at the microchip level, right? Like these keyboards have to have a microcontroller that is probably common to all of them, right? And they do this they put this backdoor in the company that produces that microcontroller, right? Instead of bugging individual keyboards. This way they do it at a scale. That's why I went today I went to a shop that is called Electronic Parts Outlet or something like that, and they sell used equipment, right? And I bought a bunch of keyboards that, if you look at them, they look from the 90s, right? I'm gonna use very old keyboards that probably don't have this microcontroller that the CPC loves, right? Anyhow, I digress, right? So I understood that all my keyboards were bought, right? And I also did some experiments, and I understood that they were tracking. So here I'm going to go more into the surveillance techniques, right? So one thing that they need to understand, I mean, the CPC, right? The Chinese agents that they have, they could be Russians, they could be, but like the agents that are living next to the home of the target, they need to understand when the target sits on the computer, because that's when you're going to either send a message, send an email, receive something, browse the internet, right? So they need to understand that, especially if you're using a satellite connection, satellite connection, because they need to start passing the cars in front of the antenna to isolate the signature, to then be able to decrypt the traffic, right? Uh, so that understanding when you are in the computer is the most important ingredient in this recipe that they've been using against everybody for decades. Right? So that understanding is key. Um, Now, one question is how they do it, right? And like they use different technologies. One is M-Wave, which is kind of a radar technology, but based on Wi-Fi. The same signal frequency of Wi-Fi, but it can be used to detect presence of people in certain places in a house, for example, right? So they can understand if you are in your office or if you are in the kitchen or if you're, and if you're in the office, in a specific part of your office, you're probably in the computer, right? So that's the idea. But you could move the computer, right? Like if you have a computer, and I've been experimenting, this is what caused this escalation, right? I've been experimenting recently with moving the computer. So what I've been doing is moving the computer to different places in the house, right? To see where is that they have less precision, where is that they miss with the cars, right? Because I can observe the cars as they start passing them in front of the antenna. Right? So if I move the computer and I see that the precision drops, I know that they have less precision in that place where the computer is. Right? So I understood that the second method is, I mean, the first method is the M wave, right, or something equivalent to that. The second method, so that's the first method, right? So I started moving the computer and I understood that it's M wave or something similar. But then they still have some precision, even in the places where if I move the computer to certain places, they have less precision. Uh, but then I started, I started thinking, okay, so how do I do this, right? I mean, how do I defeat this? So this is what I did. I, I mean, and this was a little extreme, but this gives you an idea. I'm going to tell this to you to give an idea of what to the lengths you have to go to be able to escape this level of surveillance, right? That they are capable of. I dug a hole in my house. Like there is in a specific place, of course. I'm gonna say where, but I dug a little bit of a hole. Like I excavated with a hammer drill that I have the ceramic, the flooring of the house in a place, and I dug a hole in that area, and I basically buried a small computer in that area. So the computer I can turn it on, but it's buried under the ground in a way. I mean, it's not very deep, but it's underground, right? And the ground is the ultimate shield against radio frequency, right? So the radio frequency cannot escape. So with this, I could lower the precision even more to something like 8%. So only 8% of the time they get it right. But they still have some precision, right? And this led me to think, well, how is that these people are doing this, right? How they still have some precision is with the power consumption, right? So they have, because they control center point, right? They have reasonably good precision on the power consumption. So when they see that the computer wakes up, they know that you're sitting on the computer, right? Because when you turn on so if the computer is sleeping, if you have a desktop computer and the computer is sleeping and the monitor is sleeping and you wake both of them up, that causes a bit of a spike of, I don't know, maybe 80 watt. I don't know. I imagine. I haven't measured it, right? But it's something that they can see, they can still detect. And then they dispatch the cars. But the precision is not very good. I mean, they don't get it right all the time, but they get it right sometimes. Uh, uh, so, I'm telling you all this because the informant told me yesterday that they were curious because so this is what the informant told me. When I went to file the motion to recuse, they didn't know that I was going to file. So it means that I was able to escape the surveillance for that, right? And they were wondering how I did it, because they didn't see. I mean, I guess what the informant asked me, if I paraphrase it to you, it would be like, how did you turn on your systems if we didn't see we didn't detect the computer being on with so the computer is bugged as well, and this is another backdoor that they built, right? These HP computers that I have, and again, I don't know if it's only HP, I don't know if it's these specific computers, I don't know if it's all computers, I don't know, right? It could be in the motherboard, I don't know, right? But they put a backdoor into it that the computer transmits on the using the Wi-Fi chip, even if you turn off the Wi-Fi. So I have the Wi-Fi off. In fact, I removed the driver of the Wi-Fi card, but still they can make it transmit kind of a beacon, right? And they know more or less where the computer is and whether it's awakened or not. So he told me we couldn't detect the beacon, we couldn't detect the power spike, and you will still produce this document, and we didn't see it, right? So how did you do it? Well, the answer, I'm going to tell them the answer. Like, the answer is simple, because I know um, that they're tracking the power, and I have these power banks that I've been buying over the last few months. What I do is that I charge the power banks, and then I use the computer without having it connected to the power line itself, right? So they cannot see the spike. So what I'm doing is using power that I have accumulated in batteries, basically, right? These power banks that I buy. Um, to power the computer when I'm gonna do important things, right? If I'm gonna do silly things like browse the internet, but if I'm gonna work on a document, or if I'm going to, so I'm not gonna go too much into the architecture of how the vaccine infrastructure works, but uh, the important computer that is going to connect to the internet, that computer could be using store power, so it doesn't have to connect to the electrical grid, which they control because of companies like the company of Emil, right? I mean, that company was in the electricity sector for a reason, because that's an important, that's a critical area for them to understand when everybody is sitting at the computer, right? That's why Emil has that work rights interest, right, that they had in 2019 or 2020, because the Chinese need to know when you turn on your computer, and they know that with electricity companies, right? Obviously. Uh, so that's the reason. Um, but so that's the reason why they cannot see it now, right? Because now the computer is not, I'm not gonna say buried, but it's a little bit, let's call it borderline underground, right? So they can detect the beacon, and also the power it's using when I do the things is power that is stored in a power bank. That's the reason why I'm telling you this. So when authorities see this, you'll see, that I'm consistent with what I'm saying. If you see what I bought at Micro Center today, I bought two more of these power banks, so I can increase the time I can have the computer turned on, but being disconnected from the electrical grid, because this is a weakness, right? If you have a computer that is connected to the grid, they can see when the computer wakes up. And if they can see when the computer wakes up, they can start passing the cars in front of your satellite antenna. Uh, so that's the way. I don't know if this van is police. No, it's not police. I think somebody made a. Yeah, it looked that way. I think it was a lady, but she seemed to make a bit of an offensive signal with her finger. When she passed next to my car. That was funny. Um, okay. But you see, so and this is to kind of bring this full cycle. I mean, this conversation, right? What I was telling you at the beginning, that it is important to understand the mechanism of the attack, because only if you understand the mechanism of the attack you can disable it, right? Like, because you can avoid for the conditions that they need to be met to really be met. Like, for example, what I'm telling you with the power banks, right? It's not expensive for me to see after I know, right, that one of the major vectors of attacks are the electricity companies, and this makes sense because everybody needs electricity, right? So if you're an espionage network of this size that they have, of course you need to take the electricity companies, because it's something that nobody can live without, right? The same as the gas stations, right? Well, now with the electric vehicles, but If they don't get you with the shell gas stations, then they get you with center point, right? Or equivalent companies. So that's the reason why the electricity companies are important. Um, but uh, like I guess like the lesson I learned from this is that it's important to understand the mechanism, because once you understand it, you can disable it in a way that is inexpensive. Right? Now all I have to do is have these power banks that I don't know. At this point, I have like 5 or 6 of them, right? Uh, um, and I can have this computer on for I don't know 12 hours or something like that without interruption, and without them knowing if it's awakened or not, right? Which is the important part. The important part is that the Chinese don't, I mean, the Communist Party of China don't know if the computer is awakened or not, because if they know it's awakened, then they will start passing the cars to intercept or they will start trying to get sensors to see where it's located, right? Because as the computer transmits the beacon. Oh, but yeah, this is what I really wanted to tell you, right? Why everything escalated? The reason is that I buried the computer. That's really what brought this situation to head with Tyler Technologies. Because when I buried the computer, what they did is that they pulled off this well-known TTP that they have, and I want to tell you what. I know this because they have done it 3 times to me. Last year, I also moved the computer a couple of times. I didn't went to the extent of burying the computer, right? Because I didn't understand the level of compromise that there is in this hardware. Um, but last year, when I started moving the computer, at one point they got desperate because they didn't know where it was. And it's important for them to know where the computer is, because the way the keyboards are bugged. The way they're bugged is that they transmit short range with radio frequency the keys that you're pressing on the keyboard, right? So they have the agents next door, right? That they have that this is one of the reasons why they have to buy all the houses next to the target. So they have the target surrounded physically, and they can get the keystrokes via short range radio frequency, right? This is that's the entire thing. I mean, not the entire thing, but like one of the major ways that they spy on technologies, right? By listening to your keywords, because when you type your emails or when you type your code, they will basically get the code in real time, right? As you're typing, right? Uh, so but for this to work, they need to understand where is the computer located, because the range of these keywords is not infinite; it's limited, right? I mean, of this box that they put in the keywords is a limited range. So they need to have the equipment to receive the keystrokes placed in proximity of where you have the computer, right? So when I move the computer, they get desperate because they cannot see the keywords, the keystrokes, right? So that's why they get desperate. So last year, when I started moving the computer in 2 different occasions, did this thing where they started getting desperate, right? And in their desperation, they pulled off this TTP twice. Let me tell you what the TTP is. They sent a process server, right? And they serve you with some legal documents. And for them, this is trivial because they have all the judges and they have all the attorneys that are compromised, part of the network, right? So they can create legal processes, notices. They can create it's infinite ammunition for them, right? So when they get desperate in this way, they will create a notice or they will create a document. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? But they will dispatch a process server, and the process server will trespass because I have private property signs in the property saying, this is private property, don't pass after this point, right? But because it's a process server, they make the argument that they can pass, right, to serve, which is not true. They cannot really pass. But even if you go and report them, what's going to happen? Nothing, because the judge will do nothing, right? Because the judge is working for them, in collusion with them, right, to do this harassment possible, right? So, but the real TTP, I mean, the TTP is that the process server will come, trespass, and get, in your property, and will start walking around the property putting notices like pieces of paper like tape to the windows, and they will do this in all the windows that they can find. But I mean, it's a dual thing, right? On one side they harass, right? Because you see this person aggressively stapling or taping objects to your house. This is harassment, right? To But the real weapon is that this gives this person an excuse to walk around the perimeter with an iPhone that it's enabled to intercept radio frequency, and then this will let them understand where is that you have the computer, right? And once they understand where you have the computer, then they know how to move their interception equipment, right? So that's the technique. A police officer came in, which is interesting, right? Because they do this when they get desperate, right? Yes. Um, Sorry, I'm just looking for a house, but I can't find it, and I don't want to check on the map because I will know which house it is. But when I find, I'll tell you. It's an important house. Um, Anyhow, this thing I'm telling you, it's important, right? That woman, third time. Let me see if I can get you the plate. That woman has followed me in different places over the last 2 or 3 months. Uh, Let me see if I can get the plate for you. It's a Chinese woman, and it's like the same situation with the Trendarawa guy, right? I recognize it at this point. So it's X-ray Frank Honduras 8878, and she's Chinese, maybe mid 40s, black hair, petite. She drives that gray uh, Tesla Model Y. And like the interceptions have happened in other areas. Like one time it was at Micro Center, near Micro Center. This time is here in Katy. Anyhow, yes, what I was telling you. Yes, so the process server comes to your house and start walking and with the excuse of putting notices on the windows. Like, if they really want to serve you, then with one notice is enough. Why they have to put notices in all the windows and all in the garages? Like, the times they've done this to me, which has been multiple times, they put between 3 and 7 notices in different places. But what they're really doing is scanning the house to understand what is the computer. But of course, now they can't find the computer because the computer is underground, right? And the ground is a shield against radio frequency, so they can't find it. Right? Yeah, this is the house I'm looking for. So this is Colony Green Drive, and the house is 23227, and the plate is Sam Nicole Romeo 7548. It's a silver Tacoma. And in this house, there are multiple important people, right? And he's one of the most important people, but not the only one. Like this house is really full with important people. Uh, I think he would be. Oh, I see. Being this is why they have the police parked here. So they have a second police officer here. See, so this is the same TTP we saw at the Mustang Cat. So this is 159-7406 Constable. Yes. So they have a police officer watching this street. Imagine what that means, right? Like I've described this TTP multiple times before, right? Where that's a marker, right? The presence of that police officer there is a marker on itself um, of prominence, uh, which is interesting. Okay. Uh, yes. So that's the TTP, right? They send the process server to harass you in this way, but in reality, what they're trying to do is to scan the house to understand where the computer is, right? I'm saying that this is what triggered escalation because when I see this, right, that they keep, using legal harassment, um, is when I decided to go nuclear with the patents, right? Like the things that I described in the previous demo that I did with the patents, that I sent them notices to even the companies themselves and the SEC and um, notifying them of potential market risk for obsolescence of their technologies, and to the investment funds. All that escalation, I did it because they sent. I mean, that was my response, my retaliation for them sending that process server to my home. That was my response, right? And at the end, they didn't get where the computer is, and I know that because the informant told me yesterday, right, that they couldn't understand how I turned on the legal vaccine without a footprint in electricity or radio frequency transmissions from this beacon that they have. Right? So that tells me that the process server was unsuccessful. That what they wanted to do, which was to use the process server to get the location of the computer, to then be able to move the radio frequency receptor uh, closer to that location so they can get the keystrokes, was ineffective because the computer is on the ground. Right? So I think like this beyond the little nitty gritty details of the espionage. I guess the most important lesson is what to do, right, when somebody is targeting you in this way. What you have to do is to understand uh, the the vector of attack, right, the mechanics of it. So if you understand it, you can disable it, right? But if you don't understand it, then you can't do anything about it. So that's why it's important to understand how it works. Um, yes. Yes, so but like and now I have all these legacy keyboards from the 90s that you know probably have very little electronics inside. So I don't know what they're going to do. Now this is also a test, right, that I want to do because I don't know. It's possible, right? I thought of this. It's possible that the mechanism is not only the keyboard, is maybe is the USB bus of the computer itself that is able to produce this you know these uh, radio frequency transmissions, right? So maybe the bug is not on the physical device only, but maybe it's also on the motherboard. It's possible, right? But to test this, I also bought one of those serial keyboards. So that are not USB, like the older ones. I don't know if you would remember them. That have it's kind of a circular connector that has like 7 pins, or I don't know, 6 pins, 5 pins. I can't recall. So this this keyboard that is serial. I think that was called PS2. I think that type of connector. I can't recall. I got one of those two. Like those are older, even older, right? So older than USB. Uh, so I bought like 7 or 8 different keyboards to do experiments, right? To see what is that they can or not intercept. The keystrokes, right? But I'm betting that I will be able to get to a setup with one of these keywords that they won't be able to intercept. Um, and then imagine that. Right? I mean, imagine if I can do this to them with them having my keywords intercepted. Imagine what I will be able to do to them if I have the freedom to communicate without them knowing what I'm typing. I mean, this is going to be a game changer for sure. And these keywords cost me like $4 because I bought them in this store that sells all like this is like it's basically like a pawn shop, I think. Like it looks that way. Like they have all this. You look at the equipment, it looks like garbage, right? But it's probably the most valuable equipment that there could be because these are probably the only keywords that there are in at least in Houston that are not bought by the Star Cabello. I mean, this is unvaluable. This is gold, right? But they only cost $4. And of course, I imagine that the Chinese didn't think of bugging those keywords, right? Because they're trash. They probably saw them as trash, as garbage, right? They were concentrated on bugging the keywords at Micro Center and Best Buy and Walmart, right? But they didn't thought of these ones. So I don't know. I'm very excited to do these experiments now and see what is that they can get, right? So, I mean, having the computer. I mean, look at the setup that I have, right? The computer is a little bit buried underground. So it cannot transmit radio frequency. I mean, it can transmit, but it doesn't get out, right? Um, or gets heavily attenuated at the very least. Also, it's not connected to the power line when I'm really using it for sensitive things. And the keyboard is a very old legacy keyboard from maybe 15 or 20 years ago, and the mouse as well. Uh, so this is it's a setup that I honestly. I mean, if they still get the keystrokes, is because it's in the motherboard. Like the back door has to be in the motherboard or the processor. Like that's the only thing that's left. Um, that could have the power required to transmit this to the house of John Miko and Joel Great and the Chinese next door. Um, because this house where I am, uh, it's 100 feet of distance in any direction. Right, it's an acre. Um, I mean the lot size is 1 acre, so it's not a small space, right? So this requires a lot of power to get, depending regardless of what I put the computer, the power required to get these keystrokes to the next house is not trivial, right? So I don't think it could be done with the memory module. That's what I'm trying to say. I think it will have to be. I mean, if they still get the keystrokes after all these measures, it would mean that the bug is in the motherboard or the CPU, right? Which are the things that have enough power to do this, to make this happen, right? At that distance. That's what I'm trying to say. Um, but anyhow, I feel like this was a very interesting demo. Was at least it was a lot of fun for me to talk about these things, to remember Emil Michael. I haven't thought of Emil Michael like in 2 years. But this thing with the Department of Defense and the prospect of him reading my letter, granting the Department of Defense a license, right? I mean, just to imagine what the look on his face could have been. It's just uh, on itself, it's a prize, right? So anyhow, I'll close this demo for now because I'm already arriving to Lake One Estates. But I have a few other things, but they're not. I mean, they're important, but I think it makes sense to package these 3 or 4 things together, and then I'll record the other ones in a different demo. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you on the next one.